Good evening, everyone. This is the meeting of the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District Board, regular meeting, April 18th. Let's call the roll.
Director Roberson,
Here.
Director Anderson, Director Malik,
Here.
Director Riley,
Here.
Director Edwards,
Here.
Vice Chair Adams,
Here.
Chair Paul.
Here.
Let the record reflect that all board members are present with the exception of Director Anderson.
Thank you. Who we hope will join us shortly. Okay, let us stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks all. Okay. Any additions or corrections to the agenda?
There are none.
Okay. Okay, so this is the time we can let the public know if they wish to speak to the board. Can you make the announcement, please, Joel?
Yes, anyone wishing to address the board on consent calendar, information items, closed session items, or matters not listed on today's agenda may do so only during oral communications. Please limit your comment to 3 minutes. Sarah, can you share the timer?
Let's see. If we have
Yeah,
a
I'll
few
go ahead.
attendees.
I'll go ahead and share the timer. And directors, are you able to see my screen share here?
Yes,
And at this time, I would like to, Tom Rowley did have his hand up. It just went down. Oh, there
we
it
have
is.
somebody's screen. Is this your screen, Joel? We have.
No, that's not.
I think you're sharing your screen
Yes.
inadvertently.
I think, no.
Sarah, I think that's your screen.
And I believe it's a message from Amy saying that she cannot get in, that the passcode is not good.
Okay. Let's pause while Joel.
Sarah, if you could hear me. Go ahead and stop her screen share here. And directors, could you see my timer here?
Yes.
Tom, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Yes, good evening. Tom Raleigh calling. When are you guys going to get rid of the Zoom meetings? Everybody else is either having hybrid meetings or getting away from the Zoom meetings. It's very inconvenient. It's hard to hook up. You got a director tonight that can't hook up, can't get on the Zoom. It's way overdue to get the public participation up where it should be. So that's just a comment from the general public who tries to attend these meetings. I've tried to raise my hand in the past, been overlooked. I haven't made a big issue of it, but it's very frustrating with the Zoom format. So I hope you will consider this seriously. It's time to get away from these Zoom meetings. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom, for your comment. And Chair Paul, I do not see anybody with their hands raised, so I'll turn this back to the board.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, the board is working on a plan to return to hybrid meetings probably. All right. Does anyone want to pull anything from the consent calendar? George?
I'd like to pull item 2 just for an information question.
Okay, we'll do that. Just so you know, I think there's really significant, important information in items 6, 7, and 8. I considered pulling them so that we could call attention to that information, but about the amount of water produced and from where, but we really want to we don't want to take too long tonight, so I'm not going to pull those unless somebody else does. Any other items to, is there anyone from the public that wants to pull an item from consent?
Chair Paul, I do not see anybody with their hands raised.
Okay, so let's, shall we consider the item 2 first, or the consent calendar without 2? Does
I
it
moved
matter?
Madam Chair, our protocol is to consider the full consent calendar without the pulled item and then to return to the pulled items.
Thank you.
I move that we accept the consent calendar absent item number 2.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Have a roll call vote, please.
Director Anderson? Absent. Director Edwards?
Yes.
Director Riley?
Aye.
Director Roberson?
Yes.
Director Malik?
Yes.
Vice Chair Adams?
Aye.
Chair Paul?
Yes.
The motion passes on the vote of 6-1.
Item 2.
Excuse me, Director Anderson should be online now.
Yes, she is.
Got in, thank you.
Welcome, Director Anderson. We're sorry you had trouble joining.
Me too.
Are you joining us by phone now at the moment?
No, I'm on. Sarah did some magic and got me in.
Oh, there you are. I see you now.
I'm
Okay,
here.
Good. Okay, so we are on item 2 that was pulled from the consent agenda. Director Riley?
Yes, I wanted to ask Dave, I understand we're following state directions on the authorization for, virtual meetings. Is there a kind of a time or a deadline that the state has authorized this? Does it expire the end of June or something like that? Or is there a time frame on this subject?
Yeah, my understanding that there is on the Revis bill that you're talking about. Yeah. I don't have it in front of me. Hopefully by the end of the meeting, I can get that for you. But yeah, I believe the bill either has to be renewed or it expires.
That's my understanding, if I may, through the chair, that the Revis allows the local declaration of remote meetings, but only through the end of this calendar year.
Okay, so it is an active authority we have through 2022. That is all in my question. I didn't know what there was a deadline or time frame. Thank you. I move approval of item 2.
Second?
Okay, let's have I'd just like to say that is to clarify, as long as there's a COVID emergency, is that correct?
If I may, AB 361 allows local authority to declare that your local circumstances call for remote meetings and social distancing. So you do not have to rely on the state declaration of emergency. You can do so yourself. And that's what this resolution does. But that is time limited. And if AB 361 is not renewed when it ends, then you will no longer have that authority. But you can continue to do this legally by making these findings until the end of this calendar year.
Thank you, General Counsel. Yeah, so we're definitely reevaluating as circumstances change. Let's have a roll call vote.
I think, if I may, did we go out to the public on this?
We have not yet.
We should do that before we vote.
Thank you. Yes, you're right.
Yeah, I know it's confusing.
I forget. Let's go out to the public, please. Thank you for reminding me.
I wish that's all I forgot.
And at this time, I would like to invite Tom Rowley. Tom, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Yes.
Hello,
Hello, we could hear you.
Tom Raleigh again. I just would like to reiterate what I said before. These Zoom meetings leave very much less to be desired as far as public participation. And eyeball to eyeball is definitely the way to go to have good public participation. It's been 2 years now, over 2 years, that we've been doing this Zoom meetings. Some of the other our city council, as Mayor Roberson know, they have a hybrid type format. The supervisors have had a hybrid format, at least since June of last year. It can be done. You don't need to rely strictly on the Zoom meetings. And you're a small board. There shouldn't be any reason why you can't resume having decent meetings. So when I say decent meetings, meetings where there's more full participation by the public. So thank you very much. I appreciate being able to comment on this.
Thank you for your comments. Any
Madam
other?
And at this time, I would like to invite Susan Schiavone. Susan, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Thank you. Good evening, folks. Nice to see some rain. I just want to say I totally respect what Tom says. I do feel that it's nice to have face-to-face contact, but I just want to give the other side of the perspective for those of us who are in a situation where we have a high risk with this particular illness, that it's very much appreciated that we can attend through the Zoom process, and I have really appreciated that. So if you get to a hybrid place, that's great, but I do appreciate that you're still willing to do Zoom for people that really can't come in person. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Your comments, public comments on this question are helpful.
Sarah, you could stop the screen share. Chair Paul, I see no hands raised, so I'll return this back to the board.
Thank you. And now I believe we can vote.
Director Malik,
Yes.
Director Edwards,
Yes.
Director Riley,
Aye.
Director Anderson,
Yes.
Director Roberson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Adams,
Aye.
Chair Paul.
Yes,
The motion passes on a vote of 7-0.
thank you. And it's time for the general manager's report.
Yes, thank you. And before I do, I just want to add that Dave Laredo is correct that the sunset date for AB 361 currently is January 1, 2024. At our last chair vice chair meeting, we discussed June of this year as a potential date for reopening public meetings. Certainly we're watching the BA1, BA2 combination, and it's highly contagious, but with a lower impact. So we'll be following that. And I can tell you that our average participation by the public has increased under COVID with Zoom meetings. We've actually averaged far greater members of the public participating. So we need to consider that. And we also need to consider how the speaker or other speakers would feel if there was a mask mandate for an entire meeting. Which we haven't decided yet. And then finally, as a small organization, to go hybrid requires a little bit of technology and a little bit of coverage for the meeting when you're trying to do both the in-person management of the agenda and the note-taking and the minutes and vote counting, along with being available to the public. And so some larger organizations than ours have been really successful. I've tasked Joel with looking at what it's going to take for us to do it between he and Sarah and whether we're equipped to, but as I said, we're heading in that direction. Certainly a lot of people would like everything to revert back to normal, whatever normal is at this point. So that's a little off topic for the GM report, but I just wanted to get in on that one. The first item under the GM report is item 11. And you have, or you will have in front of you on the screen, Joelle is going to share today. I don't have screen sharing from where I am today. So nevertheless, next slide. And Joelle, you probably want to change your screen to just the slideshow. Or not. There we go.
That better?
That is better. And let's go to the next slide, please. This is just confirmation that once again, our actual is below the budget by a significant amount. And the differential in the Seaside Groundwater Basin is far more manageable than we would normally expect. This time of year, we're basically through 6 months of the water year, or midway through the water year. So things are tracking positively. Next slide. The takeaway here is that there were some Table 13 water rights during the winter, 68 acre feet, which will have an important but minor offset to the supply sources, which we'll talk a little bit more about under item 13. Next slide. This is our proxy for customer demand. Again, halfway through the water year, you can see that the total is below last year. So we're still outpacing last year, meaning lower consumer demand. However, I should tell you that that difference as of the end of March is looks like 37 acre feet below last year at this time. At the end of last month, we were 106 acre feet below. So the dryness of the winter and the slight beginning of the irrigation season is pushing us closer together to last year's results. But again, we're still outpacing last year in terms of customer demand. Next slide. This is recorded rainfall. I think what the takeaway is we haven't gotten very much since December, but I think the next slide, since it's current as of basically as of yesterday, you can see that last rain that somebody was mentioning, I think might have been Director Anderson, but was just under a ½ inch up in the watershed. So this rain gauge is up near the old San Clemente Dam. In total, which is the red line, we are at about 12 inches, which is about 2 inches greater than last year, which was a dry year. However, if you were to end the year today, we would still be a dry year. We're hoping there's potential for 2 or 3 more rain events within the next week. That'd be great if we got some, but we're not really going to worry about anything until we get all the way through April and see where that takes us. And then finally, stream flow, the next slide. What you see here is just basically we've had no reportable unimpaired stream flow, not no, but very little reportable unimpaired stream flow, less than 2,000 acre feet each month, February and March. And of course, there's nothing yet to report in April. All in all, though, we're still being very compliant given all the distress signals that are being sent out statewide about drought. One of the things that you all should keep in mind is we're not dependent on a reservoir per se behind a dam like Nacimiento and San Antonio and many of the Central Valley water agencies, both CalFed and the Central Valley Project. What that means is that we rely more on our regulatory limitations. So if you take, for example, if it didn't rain at all this year, we've already had some rain, but let's say if it didn't rain at all next winter, currently sitting in the Carmel Valley alluvial aquifer is about a 7-year supply at the legal limit of 3,376 acre feet. What that means is you could actually go a full non-rainy year next year and still pull 3,376 acre feet out of the aquifer because it's there. So our reservoir is full, if you will. It tends to fill each year with some episodic rains, even if we have a dry year. So that December rainy season that we had basically filled the aquifer. The Seaside Groundwater Basin has the same effect that if you pumped a well and water came out, you get to use it up through the allocation of 1,474 acre feet for Cal-Am currently. That doesn't mean it's a great idea to just take it because the water's there, because if it's not raining, it's not necessarily replenishing, but it is there. So unlike a Lake Shasta or here locally, a Lake Nacimiento, it's not the level of the reservoir that's causing our issues. It's the legal regulatory limit. So a little bit different. Nevertheless, we will expect to do some drought messaging once the rainy season is officially over towards the end of April. So with that, that concludes item 11. I'd like to move on to item 12. Thank you. There was a request for information from board members as to where we stand on Measure J and what it would take to continue to move forward. I have this presentation. I'm also pulling it up on my computer so I can see it while we're going. So next slide. There cannot be anyone left here in the peninsula who's uninitiated, but nevertheless, at the general election of 2018, Measure J, which was a voter-inspired initiative that made its way onto the ballot. It was not discretionary by the district. It was brought forward by voters. Basically said, if and when feasible, all water production within the service territory of the district should be publicly owned. That passed resoundingly with 56% of the vote. And the question becomes, next slide, why would we do that? Or why did the authors of the initiative or the measure push it forward? And that's because there's a perception that it's a lower cost to operate, which has been borne out by the feasibility study, that public ownership can provide the same or better quality of service over the long run. And there will be greater governance and transparency with respect to rate making, management, leadership, governance, and so forth. So we continue as a board to look at exhausting all of our remedies or all of our opportunities to follow through on what the voters have instructed us to do. Next slide. This slide tells you what the three major kind of outside influencers are of that process. The first was going to LAFCO to annex 58 parcels into the district's territory so that our boundary and the Cal-Am main water system boundary would overlap, enabling a future potential acquisition of the Cal-Am system. The municipal service review of the district was updated to reflect current services provided. And then activation of what are called latent powers. We are legislatively authorized to sell water retail. We felt out of an abundance of caution, if we were in front of LAFCO anyway for the annexation and the municipal services review, we could get reinforcement and clarification of our powers. However, we'll talk a little bit more about the state of those powers in a second, or a couple slides away. Once all of those ducks are in a row, then we would, as a public agency, meet to adopt a resolution of necessity saying that we find that it's in the public interest to acquire the system, and that would result in a condemnation proceeding that would go to a bench trial over the right to take, which would enable a judge to determine whether, in fact, we've provided substantive findings and that we actually have the right to take or acquire the system. And if that is determined to be the case, then it would move on to a jury trial to come up with a valuation, because obviously the two parties would have a different view of what the system is worth. Next slide, please. So how did it go with LAFCO? For those of you who maybe missed it, they did allow the annexation. At their December meeting, they approved the new municipal service review. However, they did not activate the latent powers and in fact denied activation at the December 6th meeting and then reinforced that later, which we'll talk about. Next slide. So as a result of the December 6th meeting, our board met with staff and we kind of agreed to a 6-pronged approach on how to deal with that split decision in December. The first of the 6 prongs was to do some outreach to the LAFCO commissioners, specifically the ones who voted no. That was done both through a director making appointments to come discuss the situation, as well as myself as general manager. 3 commissioners were contacted and met with. Nevertheless, when it came time to reconsideration, the votes were unchanged. That hits on the second of the prongs where we did file file for reconsideration, which was heard on February 28th. And pretty much to a person, the votes were the same, with the exception of Commissioner Root Askew, who abstained at the February meeting where she voted in favor of activation of the latent powers at the December meeting. The third prong was to perhaps hope for and wait for a change in the LAFCO makeup and then reapply. Generally, you can only apply for the changes that we requested once in a year. However, LAFCO itself can waive that requirement and you can reapply sooner. And if we had seen a significant change, we very likely would have asked for that waiver. However, recently, within the last basically 3 to 4 weeks, Commissioner Gorley was reappointed as the public member. His term was up in 2022, and Commissioner Leffel was reappointed as one of the 2 special districts members, and then the next commissioner who is up, and there's only one in 2023. The remainder, Alejo and Lopez and Root Askew, even though she's an alternate, their terms are up in 2024. So not a whole lot of progress was made on the makeup of LAFCO. The fourth prong was litigation. We have filed litigation. The key here is demonstrating that certain aspects of the LAFCO statutes were ignored or not taken into consideration, that a decision may have been arbitrary and capricious. Perhaps there was bias by commissioners, and that perhaps the substantial weight of the evidence was not considered consistent with the outcome. This will be something for the court to decide. As a quasi-legislative body, they've got more leeway as commissioners than they would as a quasi-judicial body. So the standard for us to prove the harm and to send it back to LAFCO to follow court guidance is going to be a fairly high standard. Nevertheless, that's in progress. We examined special legislation. We successfully spoke with the Legislative Counsel's Office on language. We have language, but we're held back a little bit by having no author from our local legislative delegation, Assembly or Senate. So maybe something will change there with a bill for gut and amend. Don't really know. There's not a whole lot of movement. And then finally, the last prong is to proceed anyway under the premise, and it's not just a premise, it's a fact, the district's power to sell at the retail level was actually put into place and existed prior to when LAFCO was given the authorization to activate latent powers. And so there is There is a theory out there that we did not need LAFCO, although it would have been great to have them, as I said, clarify and reinforce our powers, that we can proceed to move ahead anyway. So let's talk a little bit about what that might mean. Next slide, and hit next for me, Joelle, if you would. So would we go back to LAFCO in that instance? No. We would bypass LAFCO. We did get the annexation, and we did get the municipal services review. As I've stated, it's not clear that we actually needed their approval to activate latent powers. It was something that we did because we were there in front of LAFCO anyway. Next. The feasibility study does not need to be rerun. There's also been some chatter back and forth across the internet that, or across email that you may have seen saying, oh, the proponents of Measure J don't want to see anything added to the CalAM system because the more expensive it gets, the harder it would be to make it economically feasible. That's completely false. The conclusions of the feasibility study scale up. And in fact, the feasibility study was done based on the addition of a $300+ million desalination facility. So it's kind of all inclusive. But the most important thing for you as directors is the takeaway should be that the math continues to work even if you were to add assets or subtract assets from the system, because it's all about replacing rate of return, monies that go to service corp, meaning New Jersey, monies that go to the general office, which means San Diego, and tax impacts. Those kinds of things remain the same, irrespective of whether it's this year, next year, or the following year. You have received sufficient information to conclude that it is economically feasible, and that study does not need to be rewritten or reperformed just due to the passage of time. Next. The same goes for the operating plans. There was a acquire all of the CalAM employees and operate for a period of time with no changes in operations while assessing whether future changes might be needed. And there was also an operating plan for a third-party contract operator, and there are no need to rerun those plans either. Next. We would have to revisit the real estate appraisal, and this is a component of a bigger appraisal. There are now, for the life of me, I can't remember the exact number, but let's call it over 100 parcels related to CalAM real estate. And our appraiser several months ago gave us an estimate that it would take 10 to 12 weeks to update that appraisal, roughly at $55,000 as a, call it a midpoint of the budget. So that's something we would have to undertake. Next. There is the broader valuation of the enterprise as a whole. So of the business, which will include the real estate appraisal, but also includes the operations. And then we also wanted to undertake a rate study and even a Prop 218. I don't have the Prop 218 costs in here, but with our outside counsel and general counsel, a Prop 218 is likely to be on the order of $20,000 over and above the $250,000 for updating the whole enterprise valuation and rate study. And then finally, next are the findings and the actual preparation of the resolution of necessity. We pegged that at approximately $75,000. There was extensive effort done through July of 2020. And then we spent almost all of 2021 dealing with LAFCO, and that's become not stale, but not current. And so a great deal of work would be needed to bring it to current and get through it. Next. And hit that one twice, Joel. Next, there we go. And then it begs the question, will there be any other litigation through this process, which we haven't anticipated, might challenge our contention that we have the power to sell retail, or that might get deferred and become a subset of the bench trial. So there are unknown legal and litigation costs surrounding, but it's really those top three with the add-on, as I mentioned, of a Prop 218, a preliminary Prop 218 process on the rate study that we would be looking at. So going forward, next slide. My recommendation is that the board have a closed session, perhaps sometime within the next month, to discuss both our ongoing litigation, our threatened litigation, and real property negotiation valuation surrounding all of these, where we can speak with each other and provide direction, and then perhaps chart a path on where we would like to go by when, keeping in mind that the longest lead time activity is the full-blown appraisal, which could be 5, 6, or 7 months of work before we would even be in a position to make a bona fide offer. All the other items that I had mentioned on the last slide would be done in parallel to that effort. So I think that's where we stand. This one, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this point in time.
I have at least one. Director Malik, why don't you go first?
Thank you. Why do we have to have another appraisal?
That's a good question. We haven't had an appraisal yet. We had a draft appraisal in October of 2020. And that timeline was, we thought we'd be in front of LAFCO basically already, that we thought we'd have filed by August or September. Then there was a challenge to our CEQA document, which pushed that out. And then there was the identification of some other issues. So we didn't really get our application in until right at the beginning of February following. And then the very cautious approach that LAFCO took to this, and then the third party reviewer and so forth, just ate up time. But we never had the actual appraisal. What we had for the feasibility study was similar to an appraisal in that we placed a value on the enterprise. But when you go and you make a bona fide offer and you put a number out there in front of the court, it really needs to be consistent with MAI standards. And so it's incremental additional work with kind of a certification behind it. So it's different. It's the formal appraisal rather than a feasibility study.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Through
the chair. Dave, I counted up your months that you had down there, and it looked like it's total. My total came up to 15 months.
Right.
So we looking like going through this another year, or can we start getting this done where we can make that offer?
Yeah.
Do all this have to be done? Go ahead.
They don't need to be sequential. The findings and the resolution would be kind of overlapping in parallel the back half of the appraisal and rate study, and the real estate appraisal would overlap the front half of the appraisal and rate study. So it's really that 6 to 7 month timeline for the appraisal and the rate study that would control it. If we want to take the rate study and put it in front of call it the voters, the property owners under a Prop 218 approval process, then that may add a month. What we would try to do, and luckily Raftellus, our financial firm, they're kind of two different entities, or not entities, but people who would be leading the teams for the appraisal work. And that's our lead out of basically out of Albany, New York. He's a managing director with the firm. And then the rate study would come out of Southern California, another member of the Raftellus team. But we'd be able to do those probably separately from each other. And so we try to get the rate study done with enough time that we could layer in a Prop 218 approval process so that everything ended kind of simultaneously. But there may be some, you know, a little bit of slippage. But I think what we would do is we'd be looking at that 6 to 7 month period from the word go. I mean, we, you know, as I said, we would want to meet as a group with the board sometime next month. So, you know, it'd be, we'd press go after that board meeting. But yeah, we can shorten it to 7 or 8 months probably.
Okay, but my next question is, and Mr. Laredo, help me with this, is it 2 court dates that we will have to make? The first one, the right to take. Do we need all that done to get in the court on that right to take? And then the second one is all this other stuff that you speaking of. It's in court, the judge said, okay, let's get it. We go through evidentiary and all that. Y'all help me out here.
As you note, there are 2 phases. The right to take does not require the appraisal to be completed for that. The appraisal relates to the valuation stage, but you need to make a bona fide offer, and that's a key. Making an offer when you don't have the appraisal means that you're not as principled in the valuation that you're providing.
Okay, and we can talk about that in the closed session, but I want to get to that first phase and I want to make that offer.
Yeah.
So we can get into this and not worried about LAPCO behind, because LAPCO is where I want it to be, and that's in court. So we need to move forward as soon as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director Edwards. Other questions or comments from other directors? I just have one clarifying question, Dave, and that's about the Prop 218 piece of the rate study, I guess, is part of. What is the question we would want answered for that piece? Is it the cost of having an election, or how that would contribute to financing the acquisition, or both?
Right. And so the way it would work is you arrive at an appraisal in order to make a bona fide offer. And Mr. Laredo is correct in that prior to the jury trial on valuation, both parties are required to give their best valuation, which is when, you know, formal appraisal comes into effect. And it might get revised, and it's likely to be revised towards the end of the jury trial as well. But nevertheless, we can't start a bench trial until we've made a bona fide offer, we've been rebuffed, and then we say, well, we believe it's in the public interest anyway, and therefore we are meeting to decide. When I say we, I mean you as the board will choose to meet to decide whether to pass a resolution of public necessity. And so you don't do that until you've been rebuffed. And what you're doing at that point is beginning a condemnation proceeding. And that will then lead to the bench trial. And so we thought, or I should say Dave Laredo and one of the eminent domain attorneys thought, well, it would be a real plus to be in the bench trial and say, based on this valuation and based on the offer that we've made, here's what rates would look like. And not only have we identified what rates would look like, but we've taken it to our constituents and we've run a negative protest hearing which means if you had 50% plus one property owners say, no, we don't like those rates, we don't even think this rate structure would be satisfactory, then it fails. That proposed rate structure fails. But if it passes, as it typically does, then you would have one added element to tell the judge at the bench trial that based on this valuation and based on these rates, we can see that there are ratepayer savings. We have the support of our ratepayers, recognizing full well that once you get through the valuation phase and there's a new valuation, that old appraisal doesn't matter. You'd have to rerun the rates at that time. And then the rates that you would have to adopt simultaneous or shortly thereafter of the actual closing on the purchase would be different. But this would be kind of a signal to the bench that not only is it economically favorable at the high level, but all the way down at the ratepayer level, these are the impacts that we see.
I see. Okay. I didn't have that piece clearly in mind. Thank you for that. Other questions or comments?
Just one comment from me. Dave, can you give us, when we get in this closed session, the worst case, the best case scenario and timeline that we can get this done? Get to the first phase of it. The offer and to get in court, the 218 and stuff, that sounds good, but that could be a little, like you said, a little further down. And we need to decide if we want to do it twice. So
yeah, and I think one of the reasons to meet in closed session is pending or threatened litigation, and the best case and worst case is going to depend on our district counsel's opinion on how good our theories are and what the likely litigation path is going to be. So yeah, that's something that we will do our best to create a timeline for best case and worst case, but we'll want to hear from general counsel as to what can, blow that all up.
Yeah, it seems to me we can't, there are parts of this discussion that we have to have in closed session because it involves pending or litigation. And so there are sort of limits to how much we can discuss this, in public session, the various paths. Am I right, General Counsel?
Yes, Madam Chair, you are. The whole reason we're having this discussion in open session is because of the board's desire to be as transparent as possible. But there is a limit to that transparency before you start impairing your own path going forward. So I do suggest that there are limits in terms of the public discussion that we should be having.
But I guess we've probably already conveyed to the members of the public and the press who are listening that we are definitely exploring all reasonable avenues to do what the voters asked us to do in Measure J.
Yeah, and Chair, I just want to thank the general manager for his presentation on this. It's clearing a lot up for the public because they want to know where are we going and what are we doing. So thank you, General Manager, for your presentation.
Yes.
I'd like to echo that. Thank you for, it's absolutely concise and clear, laying out what we have ahead of us. I really very much appreciate that. And I expect that the general public feels the same. So thanks so much for being so absolute, concise and clear.
Great. Shall we move on, Madam Chair?
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, so item 13 then, thank you.
Yep. So we'll wait for Joelle to get this one up.
So,
and perfect.
Near-term water supply.
Yeah, and I think this is important. We presented at the Water Supply Planning Committee meeting. And everyone should keep in mind there's kind of two frameworks for our water supply situation. One is long-term, And we all recognize the need for a permanent replacement water supply. Right now we're out in front of the Public Utilities Commission on the water purchase agreement, which perhaps Dave Laredo can give a little bit of an update on in his report coming up. But basically, we've gone through all of the phases of written submittals. The judge did agree to have testimony, which will be coming up a 3-day period in mid-May, rather. But we'll let Dave Laredo add to that. The other aspect of water supply from not the long term is the short term. As of January 1, 2022, the State Water Board has in effect said the CDO requirement that California American Water withdraw only its legal right from the Carmel River went into effect. And so that significantly curtailed the firm supply that's available to the company, and calls into question of how close are we to meet the CDO and not violate. So this next slide shows the near-term water supply available, firm and then less firm. So we have 3 what I call firm supplies: the Carmel River, about 3,376 acre feet; the Seaside Basin, until there's a permanent water supply, the allocation available is 1,474 acre feet. When there's a new permanent water supply, that'll go down due to the desire of Cal-Am to in lieu recharge the Seaside Basin, which would mean leaving some water that it could pump in the basin instead of pumping. But for now, for the near term, that 1474 is available. And then Pure Water Monterey has a contractual commitment to provide 3,500 acre feet per year, which it's currently operating in a manner that will do so. So those 3 add up to 8,350 available firm acre feet. Our 5-year average customer demand based on production basically at the wellhead and the wall of the Sand City desal plant, if you will, adds up to about 9,725, leaving 1,375 that needs to be satisfied. Those are the additional supplies. Next slide. Supplies required. Well, where does that come from? It comes from aquifer storage and recovery, which, over a 30-year hydrologic cycle begins to act just like a reservoir behind a dam. And you fill it in wet years and normal years, and you deplete it in dry year and below normal years. We haven't had that long of an operating history in that mode until just a couple of years ago. Everything that went in the summer in the winter was supposed to come out in the summer. So we haven't been building up the reservoir behind the dam, so to speak, with ASR. Nevertheless, in a current year, there will be some ASR supply in the winter that can come out in the summer. That's rain dependent. So it's been a little bit of an issue the current year and last year. But we do have just over 1,300 acre feet banked that's sitting in the ground and is available. And frankly, hasn't been touched for over a year, almost a 2-year period since we've last taken ASR storage out and given it to consumers. There are Table 13 water rights that are over and above that 3,376 acre feet. Again, rain dependent, but the 68 acre feet so far this year is additional water available. Sand City desal, its faceplate is 300 acre feet. We've discounted it pretty much in all of our discussion to 200 acre feet per year. It's met that in some recent years. It's been higher in some, and it's been slightly lower, like 180 acre feet. But nevertheless, Sand City desal can produce water, will produce water. But it does have some intake well issues, and its waste discharge permit, the concentration of salt is something that affects how much you can produce. And so those are things that need careful watch, careful attention. Then there's unused Malpaso entitlement. Towards the end of the agenda in the information items, you'll find a, what do we call that? The monthly allocation report. And in there you can find that there's a line for Malpaso. There's about 80 acre feet available. Only a portion of that has gone out and is utilized by some of the purchasers. So the remainder, let's just call it round numbers, 60 acre feet, is available to the company for general purposes. There are Seaside Basin carryover credits that have been accumulated from unused pumping by alternate producers on the Seaside Basin. And then there's extra pure water Monterey output that can be captured. The plant can run higher than 4 MGD or million gallons per day. It's the Monterey One water has shown that it could be run at a higher capacity. And so even though our contractual commitment is 3,500 acre feet, the plant should be able to deliver an extra 400 to 600 acre feet, call it 500 acre feet. So cobbling together these other small and available sources, we don't believe there's an issue at all in the current water year ending September 30th. And we do not believe that there will be an insufficient amount of water available next year. And we'll have one more chance to see if it rains next winter before we even get through next year. So I won't paint too rosy a picture, but I would say it's very tight, but we have the water availability. The key thing about water availability is, can you get it out of the ground and can you deliver it anywhere in the system? And those are physical constraints to the plumbing, not constraints to the supply. And that's a separate issue, but it's an important issue. Next slide. So I want to touch on that a little bit here. This is an overview of both the ASR and the Pure Water Monterey locations. This is where you see Peralta at a corner right there. That's basically the corner of Co Avenue, also Eucalyptus going up the hill into the old Fort Ord space. And then the north-south roadway that you see is General Jim Moore Boulevard. You can also see in the upper left-hand corner, Bayonet and Black Horse golf holes. So that should give you a sense of where we're looking at here in this case for our viewers. And then you can see that the pink are Pure Water Monterey wells, and the yellow are the ASR wells. And you can see ASR 1 and 2 sit just down gradient from the Pure Water Monterey injection wells, which you can see labeled DIW4, DIW2, DIW1, and DIW3, going from the southeast. The southwest to the northeast. Those are the deep injection wells. So keeping that in mind, next slide. So when you inject water for a recycled water project, you have to ensure that there's a travel time in the environmental buffer. And what do we mean by environmental buffer? The ground. Injected water has to remain in the ground. You know, the target's 6 months, but the actual requirement is 2 months. And so 2 months is desired. And if you remember that configuration that you saw without all these colors all over it, ASR 1 and 2 are the first wells down gradient from the injection wells. And so we originally, the consultants modeled travel time in what's called an intrinsic tracer test. And that's where it's all about modeling, and you predict when the water will come. And in this case, the constituents of the injected water is different than the native water. So then we're able to look at the monitoring wells, and we get a good idea of when the injected water appears. But basically, you can both model it on the computer or experience it physically in real time. And we did also a dye test, which is an extrinsic tracer test. And that dye is then observed as it reaches certain monitoring wells, and then ultimately the point of compliance, which in this case was in the application for the Title 22 engineer report. The compliance point was defined as the Peralta well, which you remember at the crossroads of General Jamor and Co Avenue I showed on the last map. So what you're looking at here, these very colorful octopus arms represent paths of travel for injected water. And the graphic on the left is when ASR is not extracting. And that means that the travel path continues on and on towards the Peralta well, kind of in the middle, just a little bit north of the middle of that chart on the left. The Ord Grove production well, which is off to the left. And then ultimately ASR wells 3 and 4, which are the northernmost wells in the middle that you see on that left-hand chart. If you were to put ASR 1 back into extraction mode or production mode, you can see those arms kind of change a little bit. They get heavily influenced by ASR 1. And you can see that, in fact, in the graph on the right, ASR 1 and 2 are the two yellow and black dots kind of right in the middle. And you can also see that the color of the travel path is kind of in that orangish hue on the spectrum here, which is in kind of that 2 to 3 month range. So the concern of the regulators is, hey, that could be potentially less than the minimum 2-month travel time. We, the public agencies who are, basically the wholesale water providers from this project, and 3,500 acre feet is the single largest now water supply resource in the service area, are very concerned about coming in under that 2-month travel time. Next slide. So the only way to make ASR well number 1 work as a production well would be to significantly reduce the injection rate of the pure water Monterey injection wells. That has 3 negatives to it. One is it could affect the performance guarantees under the existing water purchase agreement. It could eliminate the ability to provide any extra pure water Monterey water to help support the compliance with the CDO. And it would hinder our ability to put additional water in the operating reserve up to the requirement that is on us as of June 30th of next calendar year, 2023. So we are very concerned about the reduction in the injection rate. It also presents some permitting issues, both for the Division of Drinking Water at the state and the regional board for the waste discharge requirements. It creates a perplexing set of issues on how to write the permits. And ultimately, if they remain unconfident, especially the Division of Drinking Water, in the methodology that we would offer up to say, hey, we're pretty sure we're under a 2-month travel time, or over, I guess is the way I should say it, greater than 2 months. And in fact, we try to set it up for at least 3 months. That will require both a combination of trust me based on modeling and less so on the extrinsic tracer study, that it could push them, the Division of Drinking Water, to the point where they say, we've lost confidence. This is a direct potable reuse project. Shut it down. That is not a risk that we, as the wholesaler, want to take. So as of about 4:30 this afternoon, we have forwarded a letter to CalAm and to the regulators, reinforcing that the current state of ASR well number 1, which is designated as not a source for drinking water extractions, which was done basically for the tracer test period, that there is not sufficient evidence to have us remove that non-source representation. So ASR 1 as a source, in our opinion, should not be made available. And what that means is the CalAm system is very likely one well short in this very tight near-term water compliance issue time period. So we're going to work with the company in trying to identify and execute other options, one of which would be qualifying ASR well number 4 as a production well. There's some treatment issues there that we could either use the open bay at our treatment facility at the Santa Margarita site to treat it to a level that makes it a source for potable water supply. A new production well could be sunk at any existing production well site. There are some shallow wells that could be replaced with deeper wells, or we could identify a new site previously not utilized. There is some rebalancing of the sources in the season of pumping, looking more closely at what can happen on the river when, and just moving around some of the existing sources and when they're made available. We've taken a very hard look at recent data, a number of years of recent data, and there may be the potential to get more water out of the Peralta well and put it into the system at different times a year. We'll be sharing that data with CalAm in a week or so. And then there may be some other entitlement water. When I refer to entitlement water, Malpaso, the Sand City desal, both of those are currently being utilized. Their excess is being utilized. That's not the same case with the Pebble Beach entitlement and some other entitlements that are out there. So it may be possible to utilize them on a short-term basis. So these are the things that your district staff, primarily the Water Resources Division with John Lear and Maureen Hamilton, and myself will be looking at in conjunction with Monterey One Water and CalAm to try to get through this near-term situation and make water that we know exists and is available truly available to the system. So that's kind of it for what's going on in the near term, but we must be vigilant because it's a very tight situation, and we've got to solve the plumbing issues, not just the supply issues. And with that, I'll take some questions. And I have one other minor report that's not on the agenda, but still related to the GM report.
Question? Yes, Director Riley.
Dave, the letter from this afternoon addressing the inactive status of ASR 1, is there a contentious issue around that, or is it just a matter of kind of understanding what the impact of that is? And I'm guessing what you're saying is the impact is there's a reduction in extraction capacity if you close down that well. And so if you move to ASR 4 as an alternative to 1, Is there a cost related to that? And then the time frame as well?
Yep. So 3 parts. Yes, there's some contentiousness about it. You know, shame on us and shame on the company that we all got way too comfortable with using a conjunctive use well, meaning a well that was intended to be seasonal for storing water and extracting water, became accepted as a production well, and a very good production well for the system in that area. And we knew with, for example, pure water Monterey expansion, it's been clear since the development of the SDIR, and even before that in 2016, when information was sent to the Public Utilities Commission prior to the decision on the capacity for expansion, we all knew that eventually ASR number 1 and frankly 2 would go out of commission as production wells. They could remain as injection wells. So we knew it was coming, everybody knew it was coming, but it's a great well. And the company had grown reliant on it for production in that area. And so the loss of use, it just happened a little sooner because the expectations of travel time were longer than what physically got proven out. And so it's not sensible to threaten the entire, jeopardize the entire pure water Monterey production field over one well. So yeah, there's some contentiousness there. There may be some cost. So to get ASR number 4 going as production well, there's some data that the Division of Drinking Water needs for successive quarters reported. There's likely some treatment that's needed. It could be granulated activated carbon, GAC, and that could be brought in on a skid to the site, or that water could just simply be routed to our treatment building that still has an open bay. And so a system could be put in there. It's low cost relative to the expenditures we've been making on, new wells and so forth, but it still has a cost. And that timeline, as I mentioned, 4 quarters in a row is a year of data that has to be presented to DDW. If we go with treatment, and that's immediately, demonstratable as sufficient treatment, then maybe they would move away from their 4 quarters of data, because that's looking at the natural system and some blow off of water that's in the well and so forth. But if you're actually treating it, they could maybe change their regime and it would be quicker. But otherwise, ASR 4 would take a year, which is still within the range of what we're looking at. This is a 30-month to 36-month issue for us, what I call the near term, prior to getting the expansion online and producing way more water than the system needs at that time immediately. So,
and just as a quick cost question, is it $200,000 for a well?
Oh no, but not millions like we've been seeing. So like these deep injection wells, the deep injection well is like a $3 million project.
Okay, I've forgotten.
But a deeper production well on an existing site, that's something that could be done for, should be something that could be done for several $100,000, not $1 million. But I defer to John Lear, who, hopefully he's listening. If he's got a different opinion, he could.
I'm just looking at ballpark. I'm just thank you, Dave.
Yeah. And these are things that I think the district, as a good actor working in conjunction with Cal-Am, we'd have to talk about, whose money, cost sharing, what could be done to expedite it. I think Cal-Am has access to monies under their well rehabilitation program that's already authorized by the PC. They may have some emergency monies that they can use without additional authorization. the worst thing that could happen would be that they would need to go to the PUC and go through that arduous application process. It takes forever.
Well, we wouldn't want that to happen. We know how long that takes. So
Yeah.
I hope at the next water supply meeting, y'all can come up with the issues of if we got the money or whatever, so we can get this done.
Yeah.
One more question through the chair, if I may.
Please.
Thank you. The 3,500, are we going to meet that? Now we're coming up with a problem here, and I can see the paper coming in Cal-Am saying we are not going to meet it because we got a problem with ASR 1. Let's put it out there. Are we going to meet it or not?
Yeah, we are going to meet it, and by taking ASR 1 off the table, that eliminates the risk of not meeting it. And when you get into trying to make ASR 1 a production well and how much you would have to curtail injection, we've run our own forecast models different ways, and it could call into question the ability to deliver 3,500 acre feet, which is not something we as the wholesaler want to do. And frankly, it's nothing we should want for the community. The most important thing right now is producing enough water. It's a smaller fix to get that water out of the ground. The worst thing that could happen would be we don't have the water. And so anything that says, let's reduce our supply in order to keep one well active as a production, it's a difficult one for us because it's all about supply. We've all been about supply, but that's what makes it a little contentious, because you can't have one without the other. You can't have an abundance of supply and not the plumbing to get it to the consumers. And it doesn't matter if you have the plumbing to get it to the consumers if you don't have the supply. So I think what we've determined is it's an easier fix to try to find a solution for the one well problem than it is to jeopardize the, what is right now the largest supply source for the service area. So
okay, Dave, just one more final question from me on this item. Sand City's supposed to have been doing some new wells over there, 1 well or 2 wells. And next water supply, could you give us an update on where they at with that?
Sure.
I know it's their problem, but it's water management time now. So
Yep.
We need an update. Thank you. That's all I have, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Edwards. David, clearly this is really, really challenging, and I have a sense of how hard you've been trying to focus on solutions. And what makes it extremely challenging is not just the actual challenges, but that we have to arrive at a joint plan with Cal-Am to pick a solution, and that's difficult. It's very difficult. I hope that if time and energy is spent pointing the finger, it's your fault, then that just takes time away from solving the problem, which I know you are doing everything in your power to do. And I just hope that for the sake of meeting the community's need for water, that Cal-Am can stay focused with you on finding a solution to this problem.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think that we all recognize the problems, plural. And I think our first inclination, and when I say we, I mean Monterey One Water, Cal-Am, and the district, is solution-based, not fault-based. So, I think we're well equipped to work together at this point in time.
That's what we need. Thank you. Thank you. What a challenge. Other questions?
Madam Chair, you do have at least one member of the public that wants to make a comment on the general manager's report.
Okay, let's hear from that member of the public.
Sarah, can you screen share the timer? And at this time, I would like to invite John Tilley. John, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you as always for your great work. Moving to hybrid is going to be something that you'll do really well because you always do a fantastic job. Thank you, Sarah, also for your great work, and board members. What an interesting discussion. This really is just about the plumbing. It's about the size of this the desal project. It's about the size of M1W. Alvin, you asked if this worst case scenario was presented or if the best case scenario was presented. I would say that the chart that showed a $380,000 expenditure to get this done is the best case. And I think in the worst case, though, it needs to be presented so that the risk of litigation, the financial outcomes that could come with that, damages with, well, we all know, I think every single member of this board knows, is not a small amount. It's tens of millions of dollars if you lose that lawsuit. That has to be included in the discussion. So to answer that question, Alvin, no, we got the best case, not the worst case. Item 11 described drought conditions. I think item 13 would have been best served brought along right behind it to discuss the solutions to that drought condition. Too much focus is on item 12. Too much focus is on lawsuits. It's on limiting outcomes to serve the lawsuit. And I'll say that there was a member of our letter writing public that at M1W about a year ago said, we can't have desal because if we have desal, Measure J doesn't work. When he said it, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Somebody finally said it out loud. That's why the three-legged stool was put in place. These water systems are, capricious. They're engineering and they're dependent upon rainfall. And that's why there was overlap, redundancies, and really the infrastructure of this community needs to service water needs. So it's time maybe to focus more on the nuts and bolts of water supply and be real careful about how our expenditures are being used of public funds. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John, for your comments.
Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak?
Yes.
Yeah. Tom Rowley.
So I'll go ahead and allow Tom Rowley. Tom Rowley, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Yes, good evening again. I was mainly going to comment on item 12, but you got shortchanged on an issue on, I did not hear the term water master mentioned once during item 13. That is a glaring oversight. The water master and the court system is involved in the usage of the Seaside Basin, and not including that avenue or that issue or that person is a tremendous mistake. And I think it is overlooking that hopefully will be explored as soon as possible. I know Mr. Paul Bruno has been involved in the water master issue for years and has been concerned about it. I raised the issue at your last month's report about 2/3 of growing all the water from the Seaside Basin versus only 1/3 of the water essentially coming from Carmel Valley. This is a problem, a potential problem that needs to be looked at carefully. On item 12, I think that before you head down the Primrose Lane in your closed session, bypassing LAFCO, I think creates a hornet's nest of litigation that you are going to see like you are totally underestimating. Bypassing the law at your convenience is not the way to proceed unless you want to have more litigation. I don't think the Water Management District is in a position to go for more litigation. You need less litigation, and you need it solved in an efficient way to get the public's needs recognized. Trying to bypass LAFCO is absolutely the wrong tack to take. I disagree thoroughly with the suggestion, even the possible suggestion of trying to bypass LAFCO is a very poor decision. I realize this is open session. You'll be having a closed session. I recall Prop 218 in 2012. There were over half of the responses were against having the water supply charge. However, some of the people filled out the forms wrong and we did not meet the threshold. I have to believe that if you try to slip something through again this next time, it is not going to be as simple to slip any Prop 218 issue past the voters the next go around. And there will be security for any submissions that are input, not like it was last time. Some of you were not around when that vote occurred, and that's unfortunate. So thank you for letting me speak on prop for item 12 and item 13. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other speakers, members of the public?
Yes. Susan, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Hi, I'll be brief. I just want to reiterate or state that I think it's important to keep the issue of Measure J versus the desal plant separately. Dave reported that, in fact, in the buyout plan, that the desal plant was taken into consideration in terms of assessed value and what they would be buying. But that's a different issue than the fact that Measure J passed and we want to have a public water agency. So sometimes that gets to be a murky connection, and I'd like to just say it's a separate but connected issue, but it's a separate issue in terms of the desal plant. We know that that's in limbo. That's a whole nother issue in terms of whether it's appropriate or not, and where it is and its environmental impact. So that shouldn't be connected up with Measure J. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Sarah, you could stop the screen share. Chair Paul, I do not see any members of the public with their hands raised, so I'll return this back to the board.
Thank you. No, I don't either. All right. Any additional?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I've got one other presentation that's going to be super short. And I appreciate, back on the public comment, I appreciate Susan Schiavone pointing out that, yes, the desal plant was included in the feasibility study. So whoever said that, that makes Measure J not work is entirely off base. As I stated earlier, what we've learned is with a desal plant, without a desal plant, with two desal plants, it doesn't matter. The mathematics scale up, that the economic feasibility of acquisition of the system, the conclusion remains the same, whether you, throw 3 private jets into the mix on top of the desal plants. I mean, it just, the mathematics stays the same. So that's a bit of a wives' tale that we've been hearing, that, oh, everyone wants to keep the assets low because it won't work otherwise. It works, and it was actually analyzed, including a desal plant, number one. Number two, I've also been hearing this, stop focusing on Measure J and turn your attention to water supply. Well, we're pretty good multitaskers. We've been working on water supply. We tried to get pure water expansion passed, and there was a year-long delay due to some political machinations with the Monterey One Water Board, but we never took our eyes off of that. We've pushed for the water purchase agreement in front of the Public Utilities Commission. We never took our eyes off of that. We have been focused on water supply issues in parallel with these things that the voters have asked us to do. So it's not one versus the other. We're doing both. And then finally, there was a statement made about the water supply charge and the Prop 218 process that was so fundamentally incorrect. I think it bears an answer right now. There were there are 30,509 affected parcels, meaning voters in a negative protest hearing. There were only 10,343 protests, basically a third. It wasn't a half, and it wasn't more than half. There were only 207 that were thrown out as having insufficient information. So these are important things to take home with us, because just because something is said or said in a public meeting does not make it true. The truth is that the water supply charge passed with almost 2/3 of non-negative protests. So anyway, that's just for the record. Moving forward, Joelle, if you would put the last one up. So we can end on a feel-good note before we get into the business of the district. And that's, I just want to let you know we had a workshop on April 5th, and let's go to the next slide. Hang on, I've got there we go. I had to get the speaker list out of the way. So we did a workshop on garden design, and this is the ad that appeared in the Weekly, the Pinecone, and the Pacific Grove Press. Nice little ad. But we also covered, next slide, social media. This was the Facebook post, very similar to what appeared in print. But wait, next one. We did Twitter too, and Instagram. So that's just how proficient we are. But here's the important thing. That workshop had over 90 attendees.
Wow.
I think it was like 92 or 93. Very popular. The sponsors were the Water Awareness Committee, California American Water, and the district. So it's not sole ownership. But I think it's really telling that the public has an interest in these things, and we make them available. And this one was a real success. And next slide, Joelle, if you will. We've got another one coming up tomorrow night on irrigation and water use efficiency. Director Adams will like the fact that, Anderson will like the fact that we use water use efficiency here as a catchphrase.
Mm-hmm.
Right, Director Anderson? You've been asking for that. But anyway, we have another one coming up tomorrow, and I believe there will be one or two more workshops later in the season that we're working on cooperatively. But I felt that over 90 attendees was a big number that merited reporting, and the fact that we are pushing this stuff out on social media, which I'm betting most of our board didn't see on their Twitter feed, but we are doing our best to get it out there, and we've been pretty successful with attendance. So that's it for the general manager's report, and we can move on.
George.
I just want to compliment you, Dave, on the use of social media and the fact that Zoom works in unique ways. And this is another example of that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for, first of all, it's terrific that a district is running those programs for water efficiency, and that they're so well attended. And thanks for reminding us, because water efficiency is the least expensive way to add to our resources. It's less expensive than building more infrastructure, right? If we can get people to use water more efficiently. So it's very valuable to overall manage our resources and keep our costs down. So it's very worthwhile that district is pursuing that. And just before we move on to the next subject, I just want to say, as far as being focused on water supply, since I've been involved in the district, which granted is not very long, but since I've been involved, water supply has been, there's just been uninterrupted focus on water supply. I mean, that's just the way it is. So, any suggestion that we're distracted because by Measure J, it's just not the case. All right.
Madam Chair, Mr. Raleigh has his hand raised. I know he already spoke on the general manager's report. I just wanted to make you aware that he does have his hand raised.
Okay, but he has spoken, as you say, on this point, and we do need to move on before everyone gets too tired to continue. We are ready, I think, for your report, General Counsel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Earlier this evening, your general manager did refer and ask for a little more information on item 13, which is the near-term water supply report. And he was referring to CalAm's application. And if you recall, CalAm has filed an application 21-11-024, and that is seeking approval of the amended and restated water purchase agreement for the pure water groundwater replenishment project. There are three aspects to CalAm's application: seeking approval of the water purchase agreement, seeking an update on water of supply and demand estimates for the water supply project, and also seeking cost recovery related to the water supply project. So the commission has previously ruled that the application will be divided at least into two, if not three phases. The first phase focuses on the water purchase agreement, the need for the water purchase agreement, and any cost recovery or rate making related to that. A scoping memo asked for case management statements to be provided by all the parties. That was filed last week. And just earlier this afternoon, in fact, the administrative law judge Zita Klein did issue a ruling addressing the hearing on that first phase. And while the parties asked to have 2 days of hearing, the ALJ said that she would continue to reserve 3 days of hearings for May 3, May 4, and May 6th. The parties were to identify what aspects of this first phase were contested and therefore would need evidence. There is no dispute. There's no evidence or dispute as to whether there's a need for the water purchase agreement, but there is a contested as to CalAm's proposed rate making for related facilities. And so that will be the focus of this first phase of the proceeding. The scoping memo indicated that there would be hearings, there would be post-hearing briefs, and then there would be a decision on this first phase to be considered by the commission, and that phase 2, and if necessary, phase 3 would trail into later into the summer or fall of this year. So I just wanted to clarify that part of the process for you. The party that did raise evidentiary questions about CalAm's rate making proposal is Cal Advocates. That is the former Office of Ratepayer Advocates, and they are the ones that are have asked for the evidentiary proceeding. We've certainly put a request to have an opportunity to cross-examine and to provide our own testimony on that issue, but we have not made a separate proposal on behalf of the district. So these are issues that have been propounded by Cal Advocates. That includes my additional information on item 13. And I'd like to then, unless there are any questions on that.
Mr. Laredo, just one question. Going back to that last item between you and the general manager, if phase 1 is approved, the expansion, and I heard from Monterey One last meeting, they're going to have a shovel-ready project ready by the end of this month, I hope. Is that going to hold us up, or we're going to have to wait for the whole 3 phases or 2 phases to be completed? That's the big one.
The phasing of this was designed so that if there is approval, if there is authorization for CalAm to enter into the amended water purchase agreement, that would allow that to proceed. These other questions as to updating water supply and demand estimates. Those are longer term in perspective, and that will not delay the moving forward with the groundwater replenishment.
Okay, let's hold them to that. If anything possible, let's hold them to that one. Okay, thank you.
We continue to remind them that time is of the essence and we need an answer on this. That's the whole reason for the phasing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And Madam Chair, then moving on to item 14, which is my report. The sole focus of this is to provide information available to the public as to what the district is doing with respect to its challenge to the LAFCO review of the district's efforts to acquire CalAm's water supply system. The entire lawsuit has been included in the board packet. It is begins at page 99 of your board packet. It has been filed on April 1st in Monterey Superior Court. Principal drafting was by our lead litigation counsel, who are attorneys with Shute, Mahoney, and Weinberger out of San Francisco. LAFCO has communicated with us. It appears that they're going to be relying on attorneys from Best and Krieger, also known as BB&K, as defense counsel in the litigation. LAFCO has been served the petition and complaint that there is one cause of action that is included in our challenge that contends that CalAm has violated the standards set by CEQA. That challenge then triggered a requirement for a mandatory CEQA settlement conference. That is required by statute. That settlement conference has not yet been set, but there's a very narrow window for that to be held. It has to be held between May 2 and May 27. And we are negotiating with LAFCO representatives as to what that date will be. The parties are actively engaged in identifying the scope of the administrative record. The collective plan, both of your counsel and LAFCO's counsel, is to produce all documents as a single set rather than doing it piecemeal. But we've gotten acquiescence from LAFCO's counsel that we can use those records that are part of the public domain, so the transcripts that are available and other materials that we have. So I think putting together the administrative record is going to be relatively uncomplicated and uncontentious. The parties have also agreed that responsive pleadings for all causes of action will be filed 30 days after the administrative record is certified. So I think that we have a clear litigation plan and path, and at the moment there are no unexpected turns. That concludes my report on this. And I do see you have one member of the public with a hand raised.
Thank you. First, do we have any questions from directors or staff? Okay, I don't see any, so let's hear from this member of the public. On this.
And at this time, I would like to invite Tom Rowley. Tom, when you're ready, please present your comment.
I'm sorry, I have my lower hand right now, so I'm not asking to speak on this. So thank you for calling.
Okay, thank you.
Apologize.
Okay. All is well. Okay.
Madam Chair, I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay. All right. So we'll move on. Again, no last call for questions or comments on this report. Thank you, Dave Laredo.
Thank you
for that report. Directors' reports on meetings with other organizations, other agencies. Director Anderson, did you want to tell us more about the legislative meeting you attended?
Well, I don't need to talk about it, but I did ask, I wrote it up, a one-page summary. It's all about the water related,
the funding bills?
The efforts that the state of California is going to make. And I made a one-page summary of that, how much is, towards what efforts, which subject matters of water. And I think you all probably received it in your email boxes today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I read it. It's a very helpful summary. Thank you for sending that out.
Sure.
It's not in the agenda packet, but
No,
but it's
because it only came out today.
but it's
I
a helpful
realize,
summary of the funding, the buckets of funding in
Yeah,
legislation they talked about.
the priorities for spending it. And there's one particular one that, that relates to the kinds of things that we need to do. But there's so much in this packet, it's not really something to just sit there and read a bunch of numbers. So you've got it.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And I guess it's a good moment to just let the public know that we have consultants that work on legislative matters for us, both state and federal level. And they, they keep an eye on funding possibilities for things like expanded recycling and water efficiency programs and environmental mitigation, watershed, and all those, some of the things that this district does. So if there are, if there is funding that we're eligible for, we will know and we will apply. And we'll keep you posted if there's any news. But it's a good thing because that this funding is coming, because the measures that need to be taken won't happen without more public funding.
Hey, on that topic, real quick, just so you know, last week we filed an application for a community project funding, which is in essence an earmark at the federal level for the fiscal year 2023 budget. We made a request for $900,000 in support of fish passage design and engineering related to the Los Padres alternative study and the HDR fish passage study. A decision will be made in the current or the upcoming fiscal year on preferred alternatives. It may actually be too soon to begin engineering and design, but we felt we'd get in and see what we could get. So we'll see how that goes. In addition to Congressman Panetta's office, similar requests went in through both Senator Feinstein and Senator Padilla's office. So just something else we're on looking at.
Excellent, thank you. Tomorrow there's going to be a meeting of the Special Districts Association that Director Edwards and I are both going to attend on behalf of the board. Any other reports?
Yes, Madam Chair. George Raleigh, I hope be there too, because he's a troublemaker. Just joking, George. Okay, just a couple of things. I listened to the Zoom meeting from Monterey One Water, and at the end of it, they said they're going to have a shovel-ready project for the expansion by the end of the month. So I will be listening to them to hope that came to pass, that they have that done. Also, me and Director Rowley attended Seaside City Council meeting, the first meeting for this month. We talked about redistricting. We gave them a plan. So that one, with the big changes in Division 1, I hope they put that plan on their website. And I hope when we get ours, we put it on it. But we did talk about the redistricting plan. I also thank Councilman Campbell for their help on Monterey One Water. And I mentioned I'm glad they're not sitting on their hands, because that 75 to 25 we paying, we getting some work out of them. So I'm glad that they're moving forward. And General Manager, you can refer that back to the General Manager over there at M1 that I'm glad he's not sitting on his hands. He's getting something done. I'm really happy with them. And that's all I got to report. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so glad that the two of you attended the Seaside City Council meeting and told folks there what about about our redistricting and what it means. Director, Supervisor Adams, did you want to say something? No? Okay. All right. So the annual report, I think, is our next item on our agenda. To consider adoption of the annual report, which members of the administrative committee reviewed a draft at our most recent meeting.
The public outreach.
Suggested.
Yep.
Yeah.
Public outreach committee. Yeah.
Public outreach. That's right. Public outreach committee. Got sent in some suggested edits, and you have it. Any comments or anything the directors want to suggest in the way of changes?
Nope. Through the chair, I listened to your public outreach meeting, and all those comments and corrections that y'all wanted in there is in here. I appreciate it. You really brought it up to date with those comments that y'all put in. You know, and I just wonder, I know we put a lawsuit in there about Marina against the desal problem to the Coastal Commission. I hope that's a fact. I know it should be a fact because you put it in here. So if no other questions, then after you take it to the public, I'll move approval.
Thank you. Yes, Director Riley.
I would just like to comment that the annual report is a constant reminder to me the variety of issues that are addressed by our staff, our professional staff. And just because we don't have ongoing issues with some parts of it, whether it's mitigation or fisheries or whatever, it doesn't mean that work's not being done, and maintenance of database and on top of issues related to, I don't know, issues that come up at the staff level, the professional staff level, is just very impressive to me. I just like the annual report because it's a reminder, and hopefully a reminder to the public too. This is a widely diverse area of responsibility that the district has, and functions that they perform, and professional staff that are necessary for that. And I just appreciate being reminded, because we don't see it every agenda. We just only see it periodically. And I just want to congratulate the GM and all the professional staff on what they're doing and helping to publicize it through the annual report. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Director Ellie. I totally agree. And I had a similar reaction reading the report, the annual report on the Carmel River mitigation work that the district, just the annual report, but it also reviews the history of the mitigation work the district's been doing for 32 years. And it's so much that it's been doing almost since it was created. Yeah, our staff works quietly and doesn't call a lot of attention to itself doing this work month after month, but it's yeah, they're restoring the river and the area around the river, restoring it to health every year with the work they do. So I thank them for that. Dave, did you want to say something?
Oh, just a shout out to Joelle for getting all those edits in between the Thursday public outreach meeting and the Friday distribution of the packet. So thanks, Joelle.
Yeah, very quick turnaround. We appreciate all the work you did on that. All right, I think we had let's see if there's any members of the public that want to comment on the annual report.
Director,
please, Director Anderson.
Yeah, I mean, I'll make it 60s. It's a mind-boggling report, the things that this district does. It just is mind-boggling. And I agree. Thank you, Joelle. You did a marvelous job of putting this together. But I just, what an amazing organization. All these things that we do. I just wanted
Yeah.
to say.
I was stunned to find out that there's the size of the staff of the district. Is it what, 18 or 20 employees? Dave, correct me if I'm wrong. It's a an amazingly small number of staff.
Yeah, it's about 26 full-time. It'll be 27 or 8 when we fill remaining unfilled positions, and then we kind of fluctuate between 3 part-timers to 7 or 8 sometimes in big fish rescue seasons and so forth. But yeah, pretty small staff for what we do. And I can tell you the annual report did not mention the number of phone calls from homeowners and realtors who claim that there was a bar sink that has always been there and they should get credit for it, and all the other just day in and day out things that our staff has to grapple with. So they do a terrific job.
When you think of all the work on water supply, on the water efficiency programs, on the Carmel River mitigation, and the wells, monitoring the wells and monitoring the production, it's very impressive. And not to mention the public, trying to keep the public apprised of at least some of this. So we have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
A second.
Supervisor Adams, second.
Did you get public comment?
And then before we do that, Sarah, can you share the timer? And at this time, I would like to invite Susan Schiavone. Susan, when you're ready, please present your comment.
I didn't mean to mess the vote up there, but I just wanted to reiterate all your comments, and just to say, just from me personally, that I am so impressed with the professionalism at the district and the handling of everything in such a thorough and thoughtful and comprehensive way, and the absolute manic multitasking ability that you have because of all the issues at hand. So I really do appreciate you guys, and thank you for all the work you've done in the last year.
Thank you, Susan. We have John Tilley, I believe, has raised his hand.
Yes, John, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Thank you, Joelle. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, speaking of manic, when you look back at the annual strategy session for the group, and they talked about the burden that was put on the staff to support both the legal pursuits and the water supply pursuits, it really showed how you were stressing out the district. Just like to say again, it's time to focus in on water supply, water supply, water supply. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sarah, you could stop the screen share. Chair Paul,
Okay.
I do not see anybody with their hands raised, so I'll return this back to the board.
Okay, I think we can vote on the annual report.
Yes, we can. Director Anderson,
Yes.
Director Edwards, Director
Yes.
Riley,
Aye.
Director Roberson,
Yes.
Director Malik,
Yes, with great appreciation for staff. Thank you.
Vice Chair Adams,
Aye.
Chair Paul.
Yes, also
Motion-
with great appreciation for our staff.
The motion passes on a vote of 7-0.
Thank you. All right, so we have item 17. The outdoor seating for restaurants. Is that yours, Stephanie?
That will be mine. Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, board members, for all your kind comments on behalf of staff. I know we enjoy our jobs very much and love doing what we do. So this is consideration of urgency ordinance 190, temporarily suspending rules 20B6 and 24B1-I pertaining to exterior restaurant seating and the relocation or expansion of group 2 and wine tasting rooms in response to ongoing pandemic precautions. This ordinance number 190 continues the district's outdoor seating exemption that was adopted in ordinance numbers 186 and 188 to suspend enforcement of outdoor seating and the outdoor operation of tasting rooms during the current pandemic. As an urgency ordinance, it is set to expire after 1 year, so it would expire April 18th of 2023. This has been, again, this would be our third urgency ordinance in response to the pandemic, that even though currently indoor restaurant seating is available, there remains a need for outdoor operations to minimize cross flow of customers in enclosed environments and to offer an outdoor option to people who are concerned about closed-in environments for whatever reasons that they have. And obviously, we continue to have these unknowns regarding what's going to happen with COVID and whether we're going to see changes in the variants and whatnot. So this ordinance just basically suspends the district's enforcement of outdoor seating for these for restaurants. The jurisdictions have been supporting this by shutting down parking spaces and sidewalks to allow businesses to operate outdoors. And there still are a couple of jurisdictions doing that. But basically, this ordinance just suspends our enforcement until 1 year from today. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but I just wanted to keep this brief for you.
Thank you. Stephanie, questions? Yes, Director Riley.
Question about who controls the use of these, the parking spaces or these outdoor dining? Is it the city that wishes to have them extended? And is that what you're hearing from? Is it simply the COVID policy that allows it, that's what allows it, and there's no particular advocacy for it? I'm just wondering, is there an advocacy for continuing it? And is it based on individual cities and not all, it's not blanket to all cities?
Right. Yeah, I would say it's jurisdiction by jurisdiction, certainly. Okay. And all the regulation is the jurisdiction's regulation. The only thing the water district is doing is not going out and counting the seats that are outdoors and requiring them to get a water permit. But some jurisdictions at this point have decided not to continue their programs. And City of Carmel is actually wrapping up in 3 days, where they will have all of their street public parking areas back for public parking. But that does not prevent other restaurants who have the ability to put in outdoor seating or have space to put in outdoor seating, that they may have expanded that seating area temporarily during this time. And this would allow them to continue doing that without the district going out and enforcing. A year from now, I think, and we actually did bring this to the Technical Advisory Committee's attention, but a year from now, we will be re-notifying the jurisdictions that we're probably going to start enforcing outdoor seating. And at that time, we actually would be going back and looking at what was permitted and enforcing the number of seats. And if they've expanded their seating, they would be required to get a permit from the jurisdiction. And if the jurisdiction doesn't approve it, they would need to remove those seats.
Yeah, thank you. That's exactly what I was asking about.
Well, through the chair, if I may, what if we want to make it permanent for them? Do we have to go through CEQA?
Yes.
I would like to see a timeline on what you will have to do to make this permanent. Because every year, we're changing back and forth. So some may want to keep it, some may not. Some may not want to give up those parking spaces, but I'll leave that up to them. But what do we need to do to make this permanent, and so they can understand if this become permanent, fees are going to go up and things are going to happen? What do we have to do?
Yeah, let me interject if I could, Stephanie. So everything is in place to be permanent, if you will. Our existing pre-COVID rule is, a restaurant has either through use permit or through self-declaration a certain number of indoor seats, and we allow 50% of that number as outdoor seats with no requirement for securing water. But if they want to exceed it, then they have to show where that water is going to come from, that it's over and above the convenience for weather-related indoor seating versus outdoor seating and so forth. So that rule really does suffice. That if anybody decided, hey, you know, I've grown to really like our outdoor seating. Well, if it's either in excess of 50% of what they have, they're going to have to permit it, and they'll have to come to us. Making this measure permanent because of COVID really doesn't make sense, because we were doing a courtesy, basically saying we're not going to enforce as long as COVID's out there, and we let each jurisdiction make its own independent assessment and decision. But, you know, those jurisdictional decisions are rife with problems that we don't want to wade into, which, you know, in certain cases, you've got opposition saying you're selling alcohol in the public right away. You never did hearings or, you know, a downtown specific plan on parklets, that you're benefiting one retail establishment over others who can't take advantage of it. You know, you're taking a parking spot away from a retail dress shop in order to serve a food serving entity. There are a whole variety of issues, some of which are CEQA related, some of which are law related, that the jurisdictions themselves are going to have to deal with. I think our existing rule prior to this kind of emergency ordinance still stands and works. And I think that's what we'll just have to remind people that they're facing, that, you know, it wasn't, you know, a chance to kind of sneak in and mission creep in with additional seating for which you'll never be accountable. They will be accountable. It may take some enforcement time, but the existing rule works. And I think even extending this emergency ordinance has less impact. I mean, we wrote it and we were going to, I mean, when I say we wrote it, we brought it back before Carmel had its vote. I mean, so we had already agendized it, and they didn't have, even though they had an interest in extending it, the majority of their council did not. And so right now it only really applies to Pacific Grove, who still has some out there. And I think a little bit to Monterey, who hasn't come down to declare COVID over, but you know, Monterey's had a much better program where they've actually allowed users to pay for parklets, have permanent parklets, have, you know, the architecture and infrastructure in place, which may be a model that some of the others will go to, and we'll issue permits related to that based on our current rules. I don't know, Steph, if you have anything you want to add.
Well, I was just going to say, it's not only parklets, and I think you're touching on parklets, but people who have private restaurants that have private outdoor spaces, this ordinance allows them to put more outdoor seating if they want in that outdoor space.
For a period.
But it is temporary. Again, this is totally temporary. And quite frankly, extending it right now, you know, I think this is probably the last time staff's going to be recommending it unless something really crazy happens in the next year.
I'm going to hold you to it.
So.
That was a mistake. I'm going to stay on the board just for that.
Okay.
I'd like to, if I can ask a question. First of all, that the city of Monterey does have a process and an application. So if you see very few what we would call parklets or even outdoor seating that's informal, it's all formal, all permitted, because we encourage it. And it would be interesting to, and I think our whole council is in favor, it would be interesting to compare the water consumption before someone put, well, let's take the, Sir, one of the first, it's now Sir, I don't know what to call it, Sir Burgers, but that was one of the first outdoor seatings that we approved. It would be very interesting to compare their water consumption, say pre-COVID and post-COVID. From my experience, people are choosing to sit outside and you don't necessarily aren't full inside. It's a choice. And I would really just sense that probably the water consumption isn't any higher with outdoor seating. I don't think restaurants are filling up all their indoor seatings and then having additional water use outside. I think it's one or the other, but if that's data, that would be interesting to find out. You wouldn't have to do a lot of them, but sample 3 or 4 restaurants and see those with outside approved seating, what that impact would be. Another thing on that was the safety. When these things first went in, people were putting up little bamboo awnings and just weren't very safe. And so from a city jurisdictional viewpoint, you want to make sure they're done correctly and they are safe. And I still question some of them that I've seen around. And then you also hear nationally about some crazy person plowing into them. So there are a lot of issues that go into this, but water may not be as impactful as we think by having outdoor seating. That's it.
Well, I think we could take a motion.
Public comment.
Yes, as a reminder, if you would like to make public comment on item number 17, please raise your hand. Sarah, could you share the timer? And at this time, I would like to invite John Tilley. John, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Thank you. The last 2 meetings have turned into public planning meetings. You know, your job is to supply water. It's not to do city planning. It's not to discuss, you know, what cities should be doing. Is to provide them with water. Thank you very much.
Sarah, you could stop the screen share. Chair Paul, I do not see anybody with their hands raised, so I'll return this back to the board.
I move to approve.
Second.
Director Anderson,
Second, yeah.
taking it out for a roll call now. Director Anderson,
Yes.
Director Edwards,
Yes.
Director Riley,
Aye.
Director Roberson,
Yes.
Director Malik,
Yes.
Vice Chair Adams,
Aye.
Chair Paul. Chair Paul.
Chair Paul, we cannot hear you.
Okay, the motion passes on the vote of 6 ayes. I'll just note that Chair Paul is present in the meeting, but
Sound is
Chair
back.
Paul, Chair Paul,
Yes.
we could hear you now.
Thank you, and I can hear you now. I don't know what happened, so my apologies. So we had someone from the public speak. I missed that. Are we
Yes.
ready to vote?
Yes, so we received public comment from John Tilley. We also received a motion from Director Edwards, seconded by Riley. And I was just doing the roll call and everybody voted yes, with the exception of you. So I'll go ahead and take your vote on this matter. Do you?
I vote yes.
You vote yes. Okay, sounds good.
Thank
The
you.
motion passes on a vote of 7-0.
Thank you very much. Sorry for that delay. Actually, you moved ahead pretty well, and that's good. All right. Mulch Madness, I think that's yours as well, Stephanie. Item 18.
Thank you. And I will let Joelle pull up my PowerPoint and give you the information on Mulch Madness. All right, so this evening you are being asked to consider an expenditure of budgeted funds for the Mulch Madness conservation event. There we go. So the first question, what is mulch? Hopefully we all know this, but for the benefit of the public, mulch is a layer of organic material that you put on the surface of the ground. It helps to reduce evaporation of soil moisture. It improves the soil quality and helps to reduce weed growth. If you adequately mulch, and right now, if you have a new house and you put in a new landscape, you're required to put in a level of mulch. I think it's a 3-inch level of mulch. And that can reduce your water needs by 20 to 25%. So Mulch Madness is an event that the Water District and Cal-Am are proposing for next month that will be promoting water conservation in the landscape by providing a voucher for 2 free cubic yards of mulch. And as I just mentioned, this is a joint project. Cal-Am and the district partner on a lot of conservation programs because that is our mutual goal to reduce water use. Why mulch? This gives you a visual picture of what happens if there's no mulch. The ground can tend to get hotter, drier. The plant doesn't do as well, whereas when you have mulch on the surface, it helps to retain the water in the soil and it creates a healthier plant. So the Mulch Madness event is proposed for next month. It will provide an application process online at the MontereyWaterInfo.org website. Applicants will get a voucher once they've gone through the application process and have been verified to be located within the district and have agreed to certain conditions, that they will get a voucher for 2 cubic yards of mulch from Tope's Sustainable Garden Center, which is located on Highway 68 very close to Salinas. They recently moved their operations from the peninsula to that location, so they've got a larger area. The cost of the district is $15 per cubic yard plus tax, and that is a discount from the normal $35 per cubic yard. The customer has to either pick up the mulch or pay for delivery. They do have an option to bag the mulch, so it's not that you'd just be putting, and what it is organic materials that come from much of the tree service that Topes does in our area. So it's green mulch. They can bag it themselves, and 2 cubic yards really would fit in a standard back end of a car, or definitely in a pickup bed. Topes is also offering additional mulch for $25 a cubic yard, which is a discount of almost 30% of their usual cost, which is $35. Topes will bill the district in Cal-Am for redeemed vouchers. At this time, they have not specified a limit on how much a customer can purchase at the reduced cost. And that was something that came up at our outreach meeting or our Water Demand Committee meeting. So at this time, there is no limit. If there is a limit before we start the program, it'll be part of the materials that are put out for public outreach. So as far as outreach goes, the program will be promoted through Cal-Am's extensive email database. We will be having advertisements in our local newspapers, social media pages, mentioned earlier this evening, thank you, and Facebook ads, and our MontereyWaterInfo.org website, which is our joint water efficiency conservation website with Cal-Am, will be updated with a special page that will promote the program. The budget and all of this information is in the packet in much more detail than I'm providing this evening, but the total budget is $20,000. It would be shared between the district and Cal-Am. Costs related to the program include the mulch costs, the advertising and design work, website updates, and then legal review, because we do want to have some kind of a waiver that, you know, people can, so that we're indemnified in case there's any issues. So the recommendation is that the administrative committee, which was the committee that discussed this, recommended approval of the expenditure for up to $10,000 for this partnership with Cal-Am for our Mulch Madness conservation program. And I actually will plan to bring you an update at the May board meeting when hopefully the program will either be just kicking off at that point or it will be underway. And I'll get you some more details so that the public can see that up to date at that point. So it's still in development, but this is right now we're looking for approval of this expenditure. That's my presentation.
Thank you. Questions? We have someone, member of the public, who wants to speak to this? I don't see any raised hands. Any questions? Yes, Director Riley.
I just want to say that this is one heck of a good deal for mulch, and it's a heck of a good deal for the environment. I'm in contact with a number of the sustainability groups around the county, and they're all advocates for this kind of healthy, you know, taking advantage of nature the best way you can. And anyway, I just think it's an economic benefit and it's a environmental benefit, but the economic benefit is just amazing. So I just hope a lot of people participate. Thank you.
May I quickly add something to my presentation that I just remembered? Sorry. So right now we are proposing that we start this with a fairly limited budget on the mulch end. And if we find that it's really popular, there is additional money in our budget, so we could extend the program. And it's also something that we could do on an annual basis, so we can roll it out again and again as we go through after this initial expenditure for some of the marketing material.
So it's like a pilot program, potentially. Yeah. Good.
I move approval.
Second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any member of the public wants to speak to this item?
Paul, I do not see anybody with their hands raised.
Okay, let's vote then.
Director Anderson,
Yes.
Director Edwards,
Yes.
Director Mallett,
Yes.
Director Roberson,
Aye.
Director Riley,
Aye.
Vice Chair Adams,
Aye.
Chair Paul.
Yes,
The motion passes on a vote of 7-0.
thank you. And our last action item is to consider approval of our legislative advocacy plan for this year. And the summary that you have in your packet is just over 2 pages, so it's really short, but it's actually packed full. And as I reviewed it, I realized that, you know, almost all of it is environmental. You know, it's all environmental work. So it's to pursue opportunities and different ways to do, you know, environmental restoration and various environmental and to get funding to do it and to then do the things that we committed to do when we got the funding and so on. So are there any questions or comments? And Dave, did you want to?
Well, I just want to interject. It's not 100% environmental. We're focused on watershed and water supply. And so as an example, our federal thrust, lengthy, a lot of visits over a 3-year period resulted in a total of $19.5 million from the federal government for Pure Water Monterey. And that derives directly from this kind of legislative plan. And then, as was mentioned by Director Anderson, the funding buckets that are available for state level includes a variety of things, including both water supply and watershed. So we continue to pursue both.
Thank you for that important correction. Supervisor Adams?
I don't know if this is the appropriate time to ask the question, but I'm just curious about both our federal and our state lobbyists. Do we have like multi-year contracts with them? And how frequently do we review the contracts, you know, go out for RFPs? If you could just give me a quick response to where we stand with that for each of them.
Yep, they are annual. They're reviewed every June or July based on whether we're ready or we're slow. And there's been a request made at the Legislative Advocacy Committee level to address where we go in the future. We haven't regularly gone out for RFP. I think the last time, actually the time that we hired the Ferguson group, we did go out to Nossaman and shoot, a name that now escapes me in Southern California, who I should know because I knew the guy 30 years ago. And they've subsequently kind of wound down their practice. But we do occasionally look around to see who might better serve us. But yeah, it's been a longstanding renewal with JEA and Associates at Sacramento level. And now the Ferguson group, this is probably year 5 as a full year contract, but we can certainly review them. Again, the committee itself has expressed a desire to maybe meet without the consultants to just kind of talk about the consultants, which I think we will do at some point here in the future, next meeting or the meeting after that.
Thank you.
And thank you for bringing that up. So it would be good practice for us to review contracts like that on a regular basis. So thank you for the reminder. We will. Other comments? Would you like to consider approving this plan?
Public comment?
Yes, so if you would like to make public comment on item number 19, please raise your hand. Chair Paul, I see no raised hands, so I'll return this back to the board.
Thank you. Okay, is there a motion to approve the 2022 legislative plan?
I move to approve.
Moved by Director
Side,
Edwards. Did you get that, Joelle?
I didn't get the second. I got Director Edwards' motion.
Director Anderson?
Okay.
Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Director Edwards,
Approval?
Director Anderson,
yes,
Director Riley,
Aye.
Director Roberson,
Yes.
Director Malik,
Yes.
Vice Chair Adams,
Aye.
Chair Paul.
Yes,
The motion passes on a vote of 7-0.
thank you. And we are down to the informational items. I just want to note that included in those items, number 22 is a letter from our very own Mayor Roberson about the water for housing issue. Is there anything you'd like to say to us about that, Mayor Roberson?
Yeah,
Before-
sure. I would be happy to do that. It's affordable housing is one of the value drivers or part of the mission statement for the city of Monterey. And so we do have some projects, for example, on Garden Road. It's talking about shovel ready that Director Alvin was talking about. And because of the lack of water, we have a significant decrease in the amount of affordable housing that could be provided on Garden Road, which we had done some rezoning for. And the same thing applies to the downtown. And so we understand the CDO in condition 2, but on the other hand, from one state agency, and that's the State Water Resources Control Board. Then on the other hand, all of the cities and the county, I think, Mary, you got RENA numbers too, or not, right? We get these, right? We get these, my opinion, outrageous numbers that are imposed by our good friends in Sacramento, talking about 2,000 to 3,000 additional housing units in the city of Monterey. And it's not exactly a mandate, but there is the threat of losing state funding if the zoning at the very least doesn't occur. And so I think our letter simply points out that we have one agency, which is the Housing and HCD, Housing and Community Development, telling us one thing with RENA numbers just are regional housing I forget what the NA stands for, but, and so you've got that. Then on the other hand, we don't have the water for it, much less affordable housing. And so we were talking about the conflict between the two state agencies. Then the Coastal Commission also is reviewing some of this, including the ADU ordinance SB 9 about how they play a role and where this housing can be. And then you also have fire zones that are exempt from some of this. And that's coming from the state. So you've got at least 4 agencies. And in a city like ours that's pretty much landlocked and built out, we really are quite limited in what we can do. So I think our initial frustration was we did have projects, people willing to build in Garden Road out by the airport within existing envelopes of commercial buildings. And without the water, we missed a huge opportunity. And the water was, help me, Dave, 70 acre feet, something like that.
75,
Yeah.
I think.
75,
Yeah, and
right.
that was a total ask, but to do Garden Road would have been significantly less, and drop in the bucket, so to speak.
Exactly. And so I think the whole point of the letter is we're trying to get the state agencies to sit down together and tell them, if you're going to ask for affordable housing and mandate these arena numbers, these housing mandates that you have to build or zone so many units. And then we really do want, the point is we want to ask the water district to at least support our letter and ask for these people to respond. And interestingly enough, our outreach to the various boards, the 2 boards, we've received nothing. Not even a letter saying, forget about it. Nothing. So we're very, very frustrated. And that's the whole point of this. And then what was so we've got SB 9, and that's with accessory dwelling units, and that's a whole different topic. So we get these state mandates, no money behind them. And
So-
then the latest arena numbers were quasi punishing coastal cities with the idea that coastal cities, quote unquote, are elite and don't do their fair share. So we turn around and say, we've got, not only do we have Garden Road, we have 4 city properties that we're willing to put affordable housing on free land. We can't build them, no water. So
Does
I
anyone
think that's the whole thrust.
Very frustrating situation, and
Exactly.
your example is just so compelling. Has anybody suggested to the governor that he get the various related agencies together in a room and ask them to find a workable solution?
Every chance anyone has. Yep. Get them to talk to one another.
Yes, Director Riley.
Yeah, I'd like to add that as much as we can point the finger at the state not having their act together, in some way, our local community has not gotten its act together. I think the cities know what they need. They've appealed to our district for a water allocation. Dave, and the analysis that's been done about water supply and so on, they have a very small increment that's ready to be set aside for water. But a major player at the local level is silent on this issue about the Section 2 restrictions that are in the CDO, and that's Cal-Am. Cal-Am has a role to play here, and they're not playing it. They're just sitting on their hands. And I'm just surprised that they have not joined the effort to convince the State Water Resources Control Board to give a little room to the water allocation process to allow affordable housing. And I'm just very disappointed in Cal-Am on this point. I mean, I'm disappointed in the state not getting their act together, which is a harder act to get together, I think. But it ought to be easier to get Cal-Am on board on this. And it's been going on for years now, about two years, maybe 3 years. And Cal-Am is just silent on not advocating a change in the Section 2 interpretation by the State Water Board.
Well, in your letter, you ask that this board send a letter to the water board. It seems to me personally a little bit too early because, but perhaps if we get approval from the CPUC a few months down the road of the water purchase agreement and that agreement is executed, maybe that's a moment where we could consider, I think this has come up before, we could then maybe consider writing a letter at that point when it looks like we've got the green light on the expansion of Pure Water Monterey.
That makes sense to me. When Mary can help me with this, because she's kind enough to host meetings with the mayors, and Sarah was talking about there are 20,000 units of housing approved in the county.
Yes.
And in the Marina area, not pointing fingers, but in the Marina coast, they're tapping into the 900-foot aquifer right now. You've got 90% of the state in drought, and 45% of that is extreme drought. And I think it's something else that Sacramento needs to look at. We get lip service, but if this continues, if we're in a permanent drought, as you read, it's a 1,200-year mega drought that we're in. It's just mind-boggling that we're talking about classic single-family dwellings all over the county, many mansions. You've seen them popping up all over the place. And just a whole lack of transportation and climate action that goes with it. So this just could be the beginning, I don't know, statewide. I don't know if I'm the only one that's scratching my head and saying we're in a mega drought. And we have still this incredible amount of classic urban sprawl. What's going on? That's just kind of a sidebar.
That it's important.
That's a good sidebar. We do have a hand up, but on information items, the appropriate time to comment was during oral communications earlier before the consent calendar. So I think we are done for the evening.
Okay.
All right.
With public comment. So are there other comments on this informational item or any of the others? Yes, Director Anderson.
I just have one comment. There was an interesting, I guess it was an editorial in the Herald in the last week that talked about the projected numbers, the projected growth numbers in California, and looking back that they had been quite a bit higher than what actually happened, that they were, they predicted more growth than actually happened, and we might need to keep that in mind because it was a consistent pattern over, I don't know how many years. I'd have to look back at the article, but it was just interesting that they're asking units in numbers to be built based upon these expected growth numbers that have been too high consistently in the past.
Yeah. Other comments? I neglected earlier to thank Stephanie for the items that she worked on them this evening. So I just wanted to be sure to do that. Thank you for that, Stephanie. If there are no further comments, then we can adjourn. And thanks to everyone, to all the directors and all the staff for all of your work tonight.